Good morning and namaste to all of you. Let's start the class with some prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Om Bhuvava Swaha, Tatsavitra Varenayam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Asto ma satgamya, tamso ma jyotirgamya, mrityorma amritam gamya. Om sahna vavatu, sahna bhunaktu, saviryam karvavahi, tejasvi navadhitamastu, ma vidvishavahi. Om shanti shanti shanti. Today we're going to talk about the 24 Gurus of Shri Dattatreya. We learned about that in Bhagavad Puran. So, and it's very important actually. If you remember, Mahabharata has 100,000 verses, Mahabharata. And Gita is part of Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, which has about 700 verses or 701 verses. Okay. So Bhagavad Gita, part of Mahabharata. And there's equally important, not that well known Gita, which is called Uddhav Gita. So Uddhav Gita is part of Bhagavad Puran. Okay. So Bhagavad Puran. How many verses are in Bhagavad Puran? 18,000 verses. And these verses are in Sanskrit. It's a poetry. 18,000. And Uddhav Gita, out of those 18,000 verses, 1,000 verses are Uddhav Gita. It's that prominent. It's very sweet. We are reading about it in Hindi every Monday these days. But a lot of knowledge in there. Very sweetly it's said. And what I'm covering today, it is from Uddhav Gita. So Bhagavad Gita, it's a dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjun. Arjun is his friend, devotee, cousin. Uddhav Gita is a conversation between Lord Krishna and Uddhav. And Uddhav is also a friend, a cousin, and a devotee. And Lord Krishna, he mentions Dattatreya's 24 Gurus to Uddhav. So it must be very important. So that's why I thought that let's spend some time today in knowing in detail what these 24 Gurus are. And over here, the Guru really means a teacher. We can always learn from more than one teacher. Satguru is only one, but teachers can be many. So these 24 teachers are Shri Dattatreya. So I just wanted to give you a little background before I start today's lecture. Who is Dattatreya? In fact, we have done another scripture in our Thursday's classes of Avadhuta Gita. That was from Dattatreya. Avadhut is called Avadhut also. In Maharashtra, in India, Dattatreya worship is a major Hindu sect with millions of devotees. And they represent Dattatreya ji with the 3 faces, 6 hands, and a single body. Because his icon combines the 3 great gods of Hinduism, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, all 3. So that's what they see in him. It's not that he was born with 3 faces, but they see all 3 in him. A single triune. So each pair of hands carries two of the symbols of the three deities. Commonly, his central body is blue, representing Lord Krishna or Vishnu. His further two faces represent on the right Lord Brahma and to the left Lord Shiva. So three faces. At his heels run four hunting dogs. And those are the embodiments of four Vedas. That means the guardians of the absolute truth. A garlanded cow standing behind the Lord, that represents the earth. So occasionally images of the 10 major Vishnu avatars are carved on the icons margin also. That's how they have portrayed Dattatreya. What does he teach? Why Lord Krishna mentioned him in Uddhav Gita? Ancestor of Lord Krishna, Maharaj Yadu, at the encounter with Dattatreya, and he asked him, he said, how did you get this transcendental form? How did you achieve this? You are in a human body, but you are not. So that's when Dattatreya gave the list of all those gurus to him. And most of these teachings, his advice is to build up spiritual wealth through simple living and high thoughts. That's why he is called a champion of Dharma also. Talks about the right behavior. So there are a lot of themes, you will see that. I'm going to go through each one of these gurus or the teachers which he mentioned to Maharaj Yadu. We all know that Vedas teach that the sacred is everywhere. Sacred means God, the reality, the truth. In temples, images, throughout nature. So that's why Dattatreya encourages the seeker to see the world as both divine manifestation and guidance. So let's look at how he enumerated these gurus for Maharaj Yadu. The first guru, he said, is Earth. Earth is steadfast in its duties and steady in its cycles. Earth teaches forbearance, to remain undisturbed even while oppressed. Earth teaches dharma, the value of steadfast perseverance on the path of duty. Equanimity and forgiveness also. So this is what we even call Earth, Mother Earth. So that is our first guru. Second, he said, is wind. We all know that wind passes through the world like truth, unchanged and unattached. Equally like truth. It has the capacity to disturb as it swirls about in the objects of the material world. When the wind blows in many directions at once, we all know that atmosphere gets agitated. Similarly, if the mind is constantly attracted and repelled by material objects, it will be impossible to think about the absolute truth. So that's why the wind teaches the value of freedom and of staying clear of worldly disturbances. Okay. When he says, my next guru is the sky. Sky teaches that the self, like this, has no boundaries and is beyond the reach of material nature. That's how the self is. Sometimes clouds cover the sky, but the sky above is unaffected. When the mind is spotlessly clear, like a cloudless blue sky, one can see the actual form of the personality of Godhead. So the boundless sky is an eternal reminder of the eternal unity, the sky. The next one he says is the water. Water serves all without pride and purify those who bathe in it. They preserve and give life, which is why the Vedas speak of them as the God Narayan, Vishnu. Without water, there's no life. So the lesson is that purification comes from association with the purity. Water. Then the fifth guru is fire. So all these elements are our gurus. If we think that they are our gurus, we won't pollute them. Fire. Fire purifies whatever it consumes. And its qualities are not sullied by contact with the material world. One should not even consider the quality of the teacher, but only the essence of that which is taught. That's what fire teaches us. Often the gurus, they give the example that does not a boat, though devoid of paint and beauty, still ferry passengers? So fire. Next one, moon. Moon waxes and wanes, but remains unchanged. There is only one moon, no matter how many names its different phases receive. The world tends to hide single truths beneath a welter of discrete names. But when intelligence is divided, it ceases to be all comprehending. So that's how the soul is complete. It is whole. It's all pure. Although material bodies appear and disappear constantly through birth, death, then reincarnation. So moon gives us that reality. Then number 7, he says the sun. Sun is reflected in countless puddles. Each reflection seems different, but it is the same sun. Equally, the spirit seems to be contained within different bodies, but in reality, it is the same. One's self is constant, a fragment of the greater self that answers to many names and deluded into thinking it's different. The teacher should act from a sense of duty, not avarice. Teacher teaches like a son, the same to all. Then he gives another example of his guru, he says pigeons. Pigeons. And in Bhagavad Puran, there's a story about the pigeons. In Sanskrit, it's called kapot, the pigeon. He warns against developing obsessive love or attachment in the transient material world. There was a devoted pair of lovebirds. They were raising some youngsters of them. And the youngsters were trapped in a hunter's net. They didn't want to live without their children. The parents joined the youngsters in that hunter's trap. Similarly, those who focus on transient things may be destroyed by their loss, the attachments. So Dattatreya ji reinforces the difficult teachings by taking his own body as 25th teacher also later on. He points out that even this upon which energy was expenditure, it's a temporary possession. Then there's an example of python, number 9. Python eats whatever comes its way and it's satisfied. And its teaching is not to run in pursuit of worldly things, but to limit desires. Learn to accept what life brings. That's what Python does. One must accept the personality of a Godhead as the supreme controller. So they say, supreme controller, the higher truth, overlooking everybody. Control your desires. Don't think that you are the controller. Then he says, another guru I have had is bumblebee. Bumblebee actively seeks material benefits in the world. However, it does this with discretion, taking only what it needs from each flower. It collects food from all flowers, high and low, large and small, as a scholar should seek wisdom from the range of scriptural authorities. But at the same time, bumblebee does not burden any flower. It, in fact, helps them through pollination also. So he takes whatever it needs, but then helps the flower also. Just like a teacher should live gently upon the earth and help others realize their true goals also. Okay, like a bumblebee. Number 11, he says beekeeper. Where does the beekeeper makes the money from? He profits by the honeybees. Those bees, they have worked themselves to death to build up a hoard of material wealth, honey. And wealth can bring only the pain. Wealth hoarded, because that's what the honey is. Wealth hoarded waits only to fill the thief's pockets. Beekeeper. Then he says, my next guru is the hawk. Hawk picks up some food and is then attacked by other bigger birds. When it gives up the food, it is left in peace. The message again is that worldly possessions are a source of trouble. Happiness and enlightenment belong to one who lives simply and seeks only spiritual goal. Number 13 is ocean. Like the Supreme, it's limitless, timeless, and lucid at the surface. So deep that nothing disturbs its lower waters. It receives countless rivers, yet remains unchanged. Equally, the wise should seek equanimity, be absorbed by the ocean of Godhead, and remain unperturbed by the river-like inputs of the senses. So input is always through the senses. Eyes will see, ears will hear, but do not let the mind get disturbed. That's what we learn from the ocean. Number 14 is moth. Moth is the first of the series of the gurus that expose the pitfalls of the senses. Through moth, we learn that sight destroys reason, just as it destroys the moth that flirts with the flame. Because moth looks at that light or the flame, goes towards it, and gets burnt. So we should learn to control our senses. Dwell in God rather than the world. The next one is elephant. Elephant is lured into a pit by the scent of its mate or the touch of the mate, and then fettered, enslaved, and tormented by the mahout. So this is a lust, all devouring enemy, the lust. So there's no possibility of understanding the spiritual world if you don't control lust. We learn that from elephant. Then next one is the deer. Deer is driven into the nets by the sounds of the beaters. They play the drums and then they catch the deer. So the suggestion over here is that the vulgar music and entertainment should be avoided. Here is the one without purity and impurity, without whole or part. Why do you, who are in union with the identity, feel fear or grief? Why go towards that? Number 17 is fish. We all know that fish rushes towards its death, lured by greed, the bait of food. So the suggestion is that if the desire for food is controlled, so the other senses are controlled automatically too. So food. Then Guru number 18, he said, Pingla. Pingla was a prostitute. After a bad evening, becomes disgusted with her life, her body, and transient pleasures, realizing the oneness of the self, hoping for the mercy of the God within. And she decides to change her life, renounces worldly things, and devotes her life to the Lord. So expectations of this world and the people in it are the sources of our greatest misery, because she would wait for the customers, always anxious. But once she let go of that, she was peaceful. Pingala let these go and retired in peace. Let go of the worldly life. Pingala's rejection of her ancient profession is also warning to all who prostitute their time, body, self-respect, and principles in the name of a career or money-making activities. It's not just a prostitution of the body, but otherwise also. If we let go of the higher for the lower, so he says that's a prostitution. Number 19, the child. He says the child lives in innocent bliss. Both the fool and the devotee may be said to be peaceful. They are free from ordinary anxiety of the materially ambitious. So devotee's satisfaction is based on perfect knowledge, like a child, innocence like a child. Balvat. Then number 20, he says maiden. And this is first of the three teachers who illustrate the importance of focus and screening out the clutter of the material world. This young girl is surprised by guests who she must feed. She has to grind grain for them in secret. Otherwise, she will expose her parents' poverty. But as she works, her arms' bangles jingle. To keep silence, she breaks all but one on each wrist and continues working. Company is a distraction. Give up the association of those who are not devoted to the Supreme Lord. This is the actual lesson to be learned from this maiden. Then the snake, number 21. Snake lives alone in an abandoned hole and avoids humans' company. Those seeking self-realization should abide in the cave of their own heart. Number 22, Aerosmith. Aerosmith focuses to completely on his work that he fails to notice the fanfare as a king processes past his doorway. He doesn't even know that there was a procession going on. So focused on his work. Total concentration is the way to achieve self-realization. So starting from that maiden and the snake and the arrowsmith, total concentration. That's what they are teaching us. Number 23, spider. Spider builds a beautiful web and then a day or two later consumes and destroys the same web. So the Supreme exudes each material universe and after a while draws it back into the self. The Supreme Self has no desires and is beyond the reach of cause and effect. However, people make webs from their own ideas and become entangled in them. But the wise abandon all worldly thoughts so that there's no entanglement. And the last guru, he said, is caterpillar. The wasp takes and keeps in its nest. In time, becomes the wasp. We come to be that upon which the mind is set. So it's like with our own concentration, whatever we think about, we can become. Whatever an embodied being sets its mind upon, that we become. If we constantly meditate upon it. So if we constantly meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we can achieve a spiritual body just like that of a Lord. That's what we learn from Khetarpal. Okay. So these are the 24. Let me just review these for you, because sometimes this information can be confusing also. So the earth displays forbearance and steadfastness. That is earth. And the wind, the freedom of truth. Sun, moon, and ocean emphasize the unchanging nature of truth. And also that everything is a manifestation of the one eternal truth. The boundless sky and the deep, unperturbed ocean reassure that the spiritual self is beyond materiality, like materialism. The spider reminds that everything in the material world is transient. The moth, elephant, deer, and fish, they warn us against the distractions of desires. The lovebird pigeons, honeybee, hawk, and pingla warn against building worldly attachments. While Pingala demonstrates that anyone can change their course. So she was a prostitute, but she could change her course. Okay. The child's happiness evokes the happiness of freedom from material care. The python and bumblebee emphasize the benefits of living simply. Fire and water attest to the power of the teacher to purify the world. While the learner is guided by the maiden and the snake who avoid distraction. The arrowsmith demonstrates focus, and the caterpillar which teaches that by concentrating on God, one can return to Godhead, the ultimate goal. So in other words, when we look at all these examples in this material world, we get guidance. The signposts also. So his core message, Dattatreya's core message is that never judge by surface appearance, but always seek a deeper truth. That was the core message. Because normally what do? We look at only the outer appearance and we judge. So never judge by surface appearances, but always seek a deeper truth. Everything is sacred. Everything is an aspect of God. When we focus on that spirituality, only then there's a change in us. So these 24 gurus, they definitely are examples in this material world. But he is saying that learn the lessons from these, all these creatures. Whether it's the elemental forces or whether it's the bugs or whether the people you see, there's always something to learn. Another thing what he's telling us is that these 24 gurus teach about the unity of the material world. Unity. Even though in their form they are diverse, but there's a unity. There's a sacred essence in all of them. And that sacred essence is the spiritual self. They all concern dharam, how to live properly, and they promote a collection of virtues related to environmental education. Because if we respect earth, we respect water, we respect sky, we respect ocean, then we are the one who get the benefit. How to live properly, they teach us. They promote a collection of virtues related to environmental education for sustainable development. This is what our rishis taught us. So there is a contentment, forgiveness, self-control, non-stealing, purity, control of the senses, humility, learning, truth, equanimity. All of that is embedded in there. Because these are the virtues we need to cultivate. So we learn that, yeah, from this environment, all these material things, all these beings, we might think that they are insignificant beings, a spider or a pigeon, or a snake, python. He says we can learn from all of them. By proposing a way of life that treats the world gently, that considers every being to share the same spirit, the soul, we really replace our narrow materialism with a search for spiritual purification. This life is about that higher purpose, not just running after this transient materialism. Sure, money is important, but it's only a means, it's not the end. So this is what he's talking about over here. That learn the lessons from the environment you live in. Wherever you are, there's always a lessons to learn. And that's what he told, that Maharaj Yadu. Maharaj Yadu. And again, I would say that we can see that to Lord Krishna, it must be very important that he quoted word by word Dattatreya's words in Uddhav Gita. So to me, I think that means that it's very, very important for us to see, where am I learning in the environment I'm living? Am I shedding all those negativities? Am I moving towards that higher truth or not? Okay, so we'll stop it here and we'll discuss. We'll have some discussion because I'm sure you have some questions. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.